She was ready to close forever. Then the whole world showed up for breakfast. The sizzle of butter on a hot griddle was a sound Ellie Johnson had heard nearly every morning for 40 years. It was the sound of routine, of comfort, of something that felt like home, not just for her, but for the generations of people who had walked through the doors of Mama's Café in Guthrie, Oklahoma. But today, that sound felt different. It felt like goodbye. Ellie flipped the last pancake of the morning rush, her hands as steady as they had always been, though the rest of her body told another story. The ache in her knees, the stiffness in her fingers, signs of years spent on her feet, working, serving, smiling. She slid the pancake onto a plate, adding a drizzle of warm maple syrup before setting it on the pickup counter. "Table 5, she called, but her voice was softer than usual. A younger Ellie would have sung out the number, maybe even added a playful joke. But today, there was nothing left in her to give. Her grandson, Luke, sat at the counter, watching her with a quiet concern he didn't bother to hide anymore. He saw the exhaustion in her shoulders, the weight of bad news she wasn't saying out loud. He had grown up in this diner, running through the kitchen as a kid, stealing extra whipped cream when she wasn't looking. Mama's Café was in his blood, but lately it had been empty. The booths, once filled with families and laughter, now sat cold. The old regulars still came, but fewer and fewer each week. And the big chains, the McDonald's, the Dunkin' Donuts, the sleek new coffee shops with oat milk lattes and WIF had drawn away. The younger crowd. Ellie wiped her hands on her apron and walked over to him. "All right, out with it," she said, giving Luke a tired smile. "You've been staring at me for 10 minutes. If you got something to say it." Luke hesitated. Then finally, he reached into his backpack and pulled out an envelope. "Grandma," he slid it across the counter. "I found this in the mail this morning." Ellie didn't have to open it. She already knew what it was. She just stared at it, the weight of it heavier than the cast iron skillet she had lifted 1,000 times before. Luke sighed. "You have to talk to me," he said. Is it really over?" Ellie exhaled slowly, pressing a hand to the counter for support. "You know I've tried, Luke," she whispered. "I've tried everything. Rising food costs, decreased foot traffic, a pandemic that nearly crushed her completely. The bank wouldn't give her another loan. She was months behind on rent, and the landlord, a man with a soulless grin and an even emptier heart, had already offered to sell the place to developers. It's not fair," Luke muttered. Ellie gave a small, dry laugh. "Life isn't fair, sugar. Never has been." Luke shook his head, frustrated. "But people love this place," he argued. "They just forgot about it. They forgot how much they love it. He hesitated. Then, suddenly an idea sparked in his mind. It was crazy. Stupid even, but maybe, just maybe, it was worth a shot. Ellie watched him, her eyes narrowing. "Luke, give me 1 day," he blurted out. "Just one. Let me try something." Ellie raised an eyebrow. "What exactly are you planning, boy?" Luke pulled out his phone, his fingers already flying across the screen. "Saving this place," he said, "one tweet at a time." And before Ellie could even ask what the hell he meant by that, Luke took a photo of her mid-shift, her hands flipping pancakes like she had done 1,000,000 times before. He stared at the screen for a second, then typed, "My grandma has been serving smiles and pancakes for nearly 40 years. Now she needs us. Can we show her our smiles back?" He hit send. And just like that, the fate of Mama's Café was placed in the hands of the internet. Would they answer? Or was it already too late? Ellie didn't expect much. She wasn't one for technology hell. She still wrote down orders on a yellow notepad, instead of using the digital register. She barely knew what Twitter was, much less how it could save a failing business. So, when Luke sent out that tweet, she gave him a skeptical look and went right back to wiping down the counter. That Luke? Luke couldn't look away from his phone. It started with 1 like, then 10. Then 50. Within an hour, it had over 1,000. You a grandma? Luke's voice had an edge of disbelief. Something's happening. Ellie, in the middle of refilling the ketchup bottles, barely glanced up. That's so? Luke stared at his screen, his mouth slightly open. Yeah, that's so. Because suddenly, the tweet wasn't just being liked, it was being shared, retweeted, commented on, at foodielover98. Oh my god, this reminds me of my Nana's Café. We have to save this place. At Retro Eats blog. I don't live anywhere near Oklahoma, but I'd literally drive there for this. At Faith in Humanitarist. Guys, we did this for that bookstore last year. We can do IT again. Hashtag Save Mama's Café. It wasn't just random strangers chiming in. Verified account celebrities, food critics, influencers were starting to take notice. At Chef Marcus Reed, celebrity chef and TV host. A 72-year-old woman has been making pancakes for 40 years, and y'all are letting her go out like this? Nope. I'll be there this weekend. Hashtag Savamamascave. At Cara Martinez TV, local news anchor. We're sending a team to cover this story. Hang in there, Ellie. Luke stared, his heart hammering. 4,000 likes. 10,000 shares. Hashtag Savamamascave was trending. He looked up at his grandmother, still calmly wiping down the counter, completely unaware that her world was about to change. Grandma, Luke said, standing up slowly. I think you might want to sit down. Ellie gave him a side eye. I've been on my feet for 40 years, Luke. I'll sit when I'm dead. Grandma, your face is on the internet. Ellie froze mid-wipe. She blinked. I beg your pardon? Luke turned his phone around, and there she was. Her photo flower on her apron, flipping pancakes with a soft smile, was on thousands of people's screens. Ellie stared at the phone, mouth slightly open. She said after a long pause. Would you look at that? Luke laughed. That's all you have to say? Grandma, we might actually be able to save this place. Ellie still didn't quite understand how it all worked, but for the first time in months, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Hope. But neither of them were prepared for what happened next. Because the internet had already decided Mama's Café wasn't closing. Not if they had anything to say about it. By the next morning, Mama's Café wasn't just trending, it was a movement. People weren't just talking about the diner. They were getting in their cars, booking flights, driving for hours. To a tiny town in Oklahoma. To eat pancakes. By 8 a.m. Ellie's morning routine was already off the rails. Instead of the usual 3 or 4 locals at the counter, there was a line outside the door. Ellie wiped her hands on her apron and stepped out to see what all the fuss was about. And that's when she saw them. Dozens of people. Holding signs, wearing shirts with Mama's Café printed on them. One woman, holding a homemade "I drove 6 hours for pancakes" sign, waved enthusiastically when she saw Ellie. Miss Ellie, she yelled. We love you. Ellie nearly dropped her coffee. Lord have mercy, she muttered under her breath. Luke, standing beside her, grinned like a madman. You ready for this, Grandma? Ellie took a deep breath. Guess I better put some more coffee on. And with that, she tied her apron a little tighter and got to work. Mama's Café was officially back in business. But with great success comes even bigger problems. By mid-morning the next day, the once quiet streets of Guthrie were transformed into a bustling highway of cars, buses, and even a few tourist vans. all heading straight for Mama's Café. What began as a hopeful tweet had spiraled into a full-blown social media phenomenon. The hashtag Save Mama's Café was trending nationwide, and local radio stations were buzzing with calls from listeners who couldn't wait to taste Ellie's famous pancakes. Inside the diner, the scene was chaotic. Ellie, usually the picture of calm determination, was overwhelmed by the flood of customers. The once familiar clatter of dishes and cheerful banter now sounded like a relentless drumbeat. Every table was filled, and a line of people stretched out the door, with some even waiting on the sidewalk. Her kitchen, small and time-worn, was pushed to its limits. Orders piled up faster than her staff could manage, and the register kept ringing non-stop. Luke darted from table to table, coordinating orders and comforting the frazzled staff. "We've got to keep up, Grandma," he urged, his voice a mix of excitement and anxiety. "This is our chance to show the world what Mama's is all about." But even his youthful enthusiasm couldn't hide the stress etched on his face as he watched his beloved grandmother struggle to keep pace. Amid the joyful chaos, there was a darker undercurrent. Social media, once a tool of salvation, was now a double-edged sword. As Ellie served meal after meal, she began receiving a barrage of messages on her phone. Some were heartfelt expressions of gratitude and nostalgia, people sharing their fond memories of the diner and promising to return. Others, however, were less kind. Trolls and opportunists had set up fake crowdfunding campaigns, some even selling counterfeit Mama's Café merchandise. One message in particular caught her eye. A heated comment claiming that the viral moment was just a cheap stunt, meant to exploit the diner for publicity while the real money was being funneled elsewhere. Ellie's tired eyes scanned the messages, and with every negative comment, a familiar pang of doubt began to gnaw at her. She had always prided herself on the diner being a haven, a place of genuine warmth and community. Now, in the glare of viral fame, she wondered if people truly cared about her, or if they were just caught up in the spectacle. At lunchtime, a well-dressed man in a sharp suit entered the cafe. He wore a sympathetic smile and introduced himself as a local investor interested in community projects. "Miss Johnson, I've been following your story online," he said, his tone smooth and persuasive. "I believe Mama's Café can be more than just a diner. It can be a cultural landmark, a place where tradition meets modern innovation." His words were laced with promises of renovations, expanded menus, and even partnerships with gourmet food brands. For a moment, hope flickered in Ellie's tired eyes. Perhaps this was the breakthrough they needed, a way to turn the overwhelming rush into something sustainable. But as the meeting went on, she began to notice small details that didn't add up. The investors' questions were pointed, too focused on how quickly profits could be scaled and how much equity he would control. When Ellie mentioned that Mama's was more about community than profit, he scoffed lightly. "We're not here to serve nostalgia," he said dismissively. "We're here to build a brand." The meeting ended with a polite handshake, but the investor's cold pragmatism left Ellie unsettled. That evening, as she sat at the counter wiping away the remnants of a busy day, Luke joined her, his own face drawn from worry. "Grandma, do you think we're in over our heads?" he asked softly. Ellie paused, looking at the familiar neon sign that read Mama's Café in faded red letters. "I've been doing this for 40 years, Luke," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "But maybe it's time to change. Not because I want to, but because I have to. The internet, the crowds, even the scams, they're all part of this new world. And if we don't adapt, we're done for." That night, as the crowds began to thin and the neon lights flickered in the quiet darkness outside, Ellie stayed up long after everyone else had left. She pored over every comment and review, every tweet and Facebook post, trying to make sense of the whirlwind that had taken over her life. There was undeniable excitement in the overwhelming support, but also a bitter sting from the harsh words and fraudulent schemes that now plagued her. Beloved diner dot in the silence of the empty kitchen, with only the hum of a refrigerator for company. Ellie resolved to fight back, not just to save Mama's Café, but to reclaim the soul of her community from the relentless, sometimes cruel, gaze of the digital age. It was time to show the world that behind every viral hashtag, behind every trending topic, there was a heart, a history, and a hope that refused to be silenced. And as the first light of dawn crept through the cracked window, Ellie whispered to herself, "We're not done yet." Ellie barely slept that night. She had seen the best and worst of the internet in less than 48 hours. What started as a desperate plea to save her family diner had turned into a media circus, lines of eager customers stretching down the block, cameras flashing in her face, and viral headlines proclaiming her a symbol of American resilience. But now, with fake fundraisers, shady investors, and an unsustainable surge of visitors, Ellie had one terrifying realization. Mama's Café wasn't being saved, it was being swallowed whole. And she refused to let that happen. As the sun broke over Guthrie, she pushed herself up from her chair, her body aching but her mind sharper than ever. It was time to take back control. At 7 sharp, Ellie stood outside the cafe, waiting for the first wave of customers. A local news van was already parked across the street, setting up for a morning segment. A group of social media influencers huddled near the entrance, ready to capture the best viral breakfast for their followers. Luke, still groggy from the chaos of the past few days, rubbed his eyes as he joined her on the sidewalk. "You sure you want to open today, Grandma?" he asked, concerned. "We could take a break. No one would blame you." Ellie shook her head. "Not a chance, sugar. But we're doing it my way." Before Luke could respond, she did something unexpected. She walked up to the news cameras. She walked straight up to the influencers. She spoke first. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice strong and steady. "I appreciate all the love. I truly do. But I need y'all to understand something." The chatter quieted. Even the news anchor raised a curious eyebrow. Mama's Café is not a tourist attraction. It is not a quick social media trend. It is not an investment opportunity for men in fancy suits who don't know the first thing about this town. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Luke stared at her in awe. "This place isn't just a business," Ellie continued. "It's a home. And if you want to be part of it, then I expect you to treat it like one." She pulled out her phone, the same phone that had changed everything, and opened Twitter. She typed, "Mama's Café is here to stay, but we are doing this the right way. No scams, no gimmicks. Just good food, good people, and a place to call home. Hashtag where are mamas?" And just like that, the tone of the story changed. By mid-afternoon, something shifted gone with the fake fundraisers. The local sheriff's office had shut down fraudulent donation pages, and Twitter had flagged phony merchandise sellers the investor from yesterday. Ellie politely turned him down, refusing to let her cafe become a soulless franchise. And the crowd? It was different now. More locals started coming back, the ones who had been avoiding the cafe due to the overwhelming rush of out-of-town visitors. The familiar faces, the regulars, the community members who had eaten here since they were kids. Ellie could finally breathe again. She took a step back and watched as the cafe ran like it used to, only now, with a few more customers, a few more hands in the kitchen, and a whole lot more love poured into every plate. Luke slid onto the stool at the counter, exhausted but grinning. "So, I guess the internet isn't all bad, huh?" Ellie chuckled. "Oh, it's plenty bad. But sometimes, sugar, it surprises you." 1 year later, The Mama's Café sign shined brighter than ever. Not because of neon lights or expensive renovations, but because of what it now stood for. Ellie had used the viral moment wisely. She created a pay-it-forward board where customers could prepay meals for those in need. She launched a community-led ownership program, ensuring Mama's Café would never fall into corporate hands. She started training the next generation of cooks and servers, including young people from the town who wanted to learn. And Luke? Well, he wasn't just a marketing student anymore. He had officially become the co-owner of Mama's Café, working side by side with his grandmother to keep her legacy alive. Mama's Café had changed, but not in the way the world expected. It had changed on Ellie's terms. And as she sat in her favorite booth, sipping her coffee while customers laughed and shared stories around her, she smiled. Because this time, she knew Mama's Café was never going anywhere. And this brings us to the end of the story. Thank you for watching till the end. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, don't hesitate to like the video and share it with your friends too. Subscribe our channel and turn on the notification bell for more fascinating stories. Have a nice day.